I think educating people about the value of psychedelics is a big task. It's something we need to do. I rode on an airplane years and years ago with a psychiatrist, and I talked about some of the early studies where they'd given LSD to humans in clinical studies, and he looked at me and says, "They gave these drugs to humans?" And there just isn't much awareness. What people know today is what they've heard in the media. LSD makes people jump out the windows. LSD ruins people's chromosomes. And they've really kind of tainted the whole picture. When I sit down and talk to people and they say, "Well, yeah, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I study psychedelics, LSD, and so forth." "What?" And one of the things that always amazes them is, you say, do you know that when LSD was used to treat dying patients back in the 70s, that there was 70 to 80% gave favorable responses, a decreased need for pain medication? Dying people? Really? And you start telling them, and most people are fascinated. If people have an open mind and you really start telling them, it was a possibility that these things might be used to treat substance abuse and alcoholism. Terrible. Alcoholism costs society a huge amount of money. And there were really interesting possibilities with that sort of were nipped in the bud. If we could go back and develop new treatments for alcoholism and substance abuse, and not just palliatives, it would be tremendous. And when you start telling the average guy the possibilities, and all you know is what you read in the newspapers. All you know was part of a government propaganda campaign to stop these compounds from being used. What you don't know is what the value these things may really have. Do you know they were used for thousands of years? Every culture used them. We're the only ones who have made them taboo and said, we can't even study them. They're too dangerous and too scary. When you talk to reasonable people, they usually are pretty receptive. There are those people whose minds are absolutely closed to anything, not just psychedelics, but anything that's different. They totally resist change. They're rigid thinking. It's the way they were told when they were little kids, and it'll ever be thus. Those people, you never convince them. Whether it's psychedelics or whether it's politics or whether it's anything, they're really hardened in their positions. But I think intelligent people, when you sit down, a lot of times people are surprised when I tell them what I do, and oh, really? And then once you start telling them the details, they go, wow, that's really interesting. What are you doing now? What are you doing next? So I think education is a big part of it. And if we get people educated, I think the attitudes will change a little bit too. We're far enough from the 60s that a lot of that, I think, is starting to fade out.